The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to Coffee and Comics, part of the Secrets of Movies and TV Shows podcast. We'll be talking about the hidden meanings and deeper layers of superhero movies and the great comic book stories they adapt. I'm Thomas Salerno, and today I'm joined by David Handlos. Hello, David.
Hello. Insert catchphrase here.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. That's great. And Pat Mason. Hi, Pat.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
And Andrew Hermiz. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. Pleasure to be here.
And be sure to follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app or directory of choice. And you can find us on social media, where we are at Facebook/StarQuest Media, or on Twitter, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And please do us a big favor by sharing the podcast with all your friends, and especially any comic book fans you know out there in the world, because we're going to be talking about all kinds of cool topics in the future. But for tonight's discussion, since in our sort of premiere episode, we did the state of the DC Extended Universe, I believe it's called, we are doing its more successful big brother, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the state of the MCU, its future, all that great stuff. So I actually wanted to start off our discussion tonight of kind of finding out what's all our kind of backstory with Marvel. When did we first become interested in these characters? Andrew, what about you? Who's your favorite Marvel character, and how did you first become aware of these awesome comic book heroes?
It's a great question. I mean, I would say my introduction to Marvel was definitely Spider-Man. And if I had to pick one favorite character, it would be Spider-Man. I think the very first comic I can remember was having a Spider-Man Carnage comic, Spider-Man Unlimited, is my earliest memory of a comic that I actually read and got into. So my love of comics started there, and then I got into Batman, and Marvel. Growing up, Marvel and DC wasn't really a thing that I thought about as a kid. Whatever the differences were in the dynamic and how like there were different characters in each one, but in the comics, if people don't know this, there was actually a crossover between Marvel and DC from time to time. If you ever played like Marvel versus Capcom, or there's a lot of crossover with Marvel and other properties too in those video games, which I loved growing up. So yeah, growing up, it was just like I just liked what I liked, and Spider-Man and Batman were definitely my two favorite characters. Obviously, when I got older and kind of rediscovered my love for comics, like around college, it was very much DC oriented. I got into like I mentioned in the last podcast, I get Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and all that. But I definitely got into the Marvel comics again when the MCU started. So now I read everything. So I'm still in love with Marvel to this day. So I still read plenty of Marvel, I like all Marvel properties. And growing up, the cartoons were big. So obviously the Spider-Man animated series, the X-Men animated series were some of my favorite things watching growing up, and ones I like to revisit from time to time. So that's sort of my history with Marvel and how it started.
Yeah, I remember those cartoons. That was probably my introduction to the Marvel characters, especially the X-Men show. They were probably the first Marvel characters that I was aware of ever. Like, and also Spider-Man. But I was too young. Like, I wasn't really aware they were part of the same universe, I guess. And like my interests leaned more towards like the DC shows with Batman and Superman and stuff. But I did like the X-Men. And I don't think I really got interested in Marvel comics until they relaunched with their Ultimate line of comics in the early 2000s, which the MCU is kind of heavily based off of. The Ultimate line. I started reading Ultimate Spider-Man and The Ultimates, which was kind of like their version of the Avengers. And I remember like I was like a teenager. I was like 13 or 14 when those started coming out. And of course, being a teenager, I'm like, yeah, I want the more realistic, grounded stories, which is what gritty, which is like what the some of the Ultimate stories were trying to be. Now I look back on them, and some of them, like especially Ultimate X-Men, I'm like, maybe it's a little bit too gritty, but for my tastes now, I'm a big fan of the Marvel characters, especially since the MCU movies have, that and playing Marvel Ultimate Alliance, the video game, helped me like immensely with learning all the names of the characters and who they were, being more of a DC guy. I love those on the PlayStation 2. I think the first couple were, I love those games. But Pat, how about you? What's your history with the Marvel Universe?
Yeah, so, comics for me until I got a little bit older were about the artwork. And I don't know what it is. I don't know. I couldn't point to the artist because I'm bad with names. But for some reason, the cover art for Marvel Comics when I first came into collecting comics was way cooler to me than most of the DC stuff. And so that is what I gravitated towards. So it's funny, I looked through my comic book collection, and at the beginning of it, there's just this hodgepodge of like random stuff. It's mostly like X-Men and Iron Man and occasionally a couple other Spider-Man comics, but it was just like whatever I thought was cool. And I've always been kind of into machines and kind of a gearhead, so the Iron Man stuff always kind of spoke to me. And then, like, one of my personality traits is I'm a collector. As you can see by some of the game series on the wall behind me that I have, like I had to get every one in that line of whatever. And Marvel came out with these card collectors that you could get, kind of like baseball cards, but they were for the heroes. And I collected those things like mad. And
yeah, me too. I still have some of mine.
Yeah. And so I knew all about the Marvel Universe without ever having really read any of the comics.
Yeah.
And then the shows came out, right? And the X-Men came out. And that was, of course, in my, the hyper angsty middle school years where you feel like an outsider and you just want to belong somewhere. And it just, it sort of wrapped me up in all of that. So then I started actually reading the comics. and X-Men was probably the first one I really read. And interestingly enough, one of the first series I collected was the Infinity War series, the big crossover Infinity War event. But I was still mostly interested in the artwork and the collection aspect of it. So I would like rush to the comic store to find, does this one have the little token on it that says it's part of the Infinity War? Then I'll buy it. I don't care. I've never heard of Moon Knight in my life, but I'm buying this comic because it has the little the thing, the crossover symbol. And and then eventually Death of Superman came out, and I actually read one of the events, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Go back and read the Infinity War. But then Marvel came out with Civil War, and that for me was just the ultimate awesomeness, because it was taking all of these characters whose comics I had never really read, but who I knew because of the cards and because of the TV shows and whatnot, and mashed them up in this huge war that was actually asking a really pertinent question, I thought, which was like, you got all these masked people running around, and collateral, average everyday citizens die because of that. And like, what's the repercussions? Like, what happens? Like, how does the government deal with this? So it's a really cool question. I love that. And I went through a phase in college, so that was like near college. And then I'm sorry, I'm giving my life story here, but I went through a phase in college where I struggled with alcohol. And some of my friends kind of pulled me out of that. And it was a very, grace of God sort of a thing. And I remember one of my friends getting me the Demon in a Bottle series from Iron Man, and reading through that and really kind of like, and it's funny because Iron Man was one of the first comics I collected, but I never really read his stories. And that kind of brought me into, who Tony Stark was and what his struggles were. And of course, at the time I was an aerospace engineer that was investigating getting also into nuclear engineering. So the whole concept was really cool, like what Tony Stark did and Iron Man. And then the movie came out. And I was like, well, this is just phenomenal. And so, yeah, that's I guess that's my journey within the Marvel space.
I really identify with what you said about just picking up comics because you like the cover, because that just happened to me today. I was at my local thrift store, and when you just walk in, they have a bunch of bins full of just kind of loose issues of comics from, like, I think mostly the 80s and the 90s. I guess someone had like just dumped their whole collection to the thrift store. But anyway, I just picked up a bunch of random issues of like Excalibur and like X-Force just because Nightcrawler or Beast was on the cover. And they're two of my favorite X-Men. So I'm like, I like these characters. They're on the cover. I'm taking this comic. So I still have that kind of that impulsive collecting habit too. David, what about you? What's your Marvel story?
Well, my Marvel story probably starts with someone who was born in '79, so I basically had two options when I was a little kid. I could either watch Super Friends or I could watch Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And I kind of gravitated towards Spider-Man because after the first couple episodes, you notice that the heroes on the Super Friends were pretty much interchangeable. Like, you could give each other you could just swap out power. They're the same, the same people no matter what. And everything was always fine at the end of the episode. But with the Spider-Man, even though it was a kid's cartoon, really, his life kind of sucked for a lot. So I mean, even for a kid's cartoon, he just nothing ever totally went right for him. He they'd kind of a mostly happy ending, but like at the end of the episode, but nothing ever really went totally his way. And growing up in minor life story, but like I grew up on I was born in Fort Riley, Kansas. After my mom got out of the military, my dad got a job teaching on base. So even though we weren't in the military, we were kind of in the military, because if you live in or around a military base, kids keep going in and out every couple of years. So there isn't this whole well, I've grown up with these friends all my life, and it's like the cast of characters constantly changes. So it's like everyone's an outsider. Everyone feels kind of like there's no basically Marvel comics didn't just speak to me, but a bunch of other my friends too, because everyone was from all walks of life and constantly moving in and out of the base. So that Marvel comics seemed to match our lives a bit more. So that was, by the time the X-Men cartoon came out in the 90s, that totally hit all of us right where we lived. We all felt kind of like outcasts already. And these guys are guys who are just, they don't fit in anywhere. They have powers, but some of them make their lives worse, like Cyclops or Nightcrawler or Beast. And they're like, I have powers, but I can't really go out on a date. Superman doesn't have that problem. So pretty much the 80s and 90s were all about Marvel for me. I finally started reading DC. I picked up DC during the death of Superman and would read some stuff, and it really caught on to me like later in the late 90s and the 2000s. But yeah, pretty much I started collecting on Spider-Man because he was the first one I ever got that, I felt like he kind of hit the teenage. I think that if I remember reading somewhere, I think that's what Stan Lee was aiming for. He wanted a teenager that was just like had all the same problems, and like, yeah, that's pretty much that pretty much spoke to me. But so in the 90s though, there were so many different Spider-Man books. It was almost too much.
Yeah, it was like four different series going at one time.
Yeah, so I could not keep up. Actually, for a while, there's this, they keep trying to relaunch it, but in the 90s, there was actually a comic book series called The New Warriors that came out. It basically, if I wanted to sum it up, it was the closest thing in the 90s that Marvel had to the Teen Titans, because they were pretty much the sidekicks or also-rans or whatever of more established heroes. Instead of Namor, they had Namorita, like his cousin, and a whole bunch of other heroes who didn't quite make teen era heroes that didn't quite make the cut, and they would try to do the right thing, but sometimes they screwed up a lot. Actually, they even accidentally got on the wrong side of a civil war in another country and had to answer for that. But they did it really kind of, I mean, wasn't on the Civil War level, but they had consequences to their actions. Like, Spider-Man's always my favorite, but Marvel always had this whole range of very interesting, weird, quirky characters that DC finally started doing later on, but just Marvel did it first. That's my history.
Next question I want to ask is an interesting one with regards to the MCU, because like when the MCU burst onto the stage, what was that, 2008 was Iron Man? It changed everything. superhero movies were never the same after that. And there's been a ton of great MCU movies, a few stinkers, but they usually, especially in the first, what is it, 3 or 4? Actually, which phase are we on now? Phase 4, right? I think it's phase 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think Secret War is going to start 5, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay.
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was the end of 4, but I could be wrong.
Right.
I think Kang Dynasty is going to end 4, and then and I think Fantastic Four is going to start 5.
Oh, wow.
Don't quote me on that though, but I think if I remember the whole visual thing when they announced it, I think that's how it went.
Yeah, but that thing changes every like 6 months.
I'll get into that
especially these days
later, but yeah, but like that first arc, the Thanos arc, the Infinity War story, they were almost batting 1,000 all the time. But I want to ask you guys, what is your favorite MCU movie or streaming series, whatever, to date? Which is your favorite one? I know it's a hard question, but because there are so many good ones.
It's really not hard for me. It might be hard because it's hard to pick between the two. It's Infinity War and Endgame. I mean, it's probably I know it's probably like an easy answer, but I think we touched upon this in the DC podcast that we did when we're talking about our favorite movies. I think we're probably never gonna see movies like that, Infinity War and Endgame, in our lifetime. I mean, the sort of culmination of 26 movies and whatever it was, leading up to this whole big event, and they really like knocked it out of the park. I think the majority of people would agree. I mean, they were so very well received, and Infinity War was such a great accomplishment because they had a lot riding on Thanos. I mean, they've been setting up Thanos since phase 1, basically, and to capture that performance, like everything with Josh Brolin's performance and the CGI, like it I think it was perfect timing where the CGI was to a level where you could have Thanos as basically the main character of the film, and he's the one that wins in the end, right? So
yeah,
that's what made that movie compelling too, is like just seeing it from that perspective, and then just having all these characters that we've grown attached to because of their solo films and crossover films. The stakes were just so high, and the sort of emotional response was just, there was no cinematic experience that I could compare it to, because again, it's like 20 some odd movies leading up to this, and then you with Endgame you have like just every character you could think of, when they're coming out of the portals, and you have all these moments where Cap has Thor's hammer, and
so good.
Yeah, it's like the whole theater. I'll never forget like that experience in the theater when that happened.
Yeah,
where everyone just erupted, and then obviously with Tony making the ultimate sacrifice at the end, I was just like sobbing like a baby. Those are, if I had to pick one, I would maybe lean a little towards Infinity War, because I just like how they handled Thanos' character in that film. Obviously the Thanos we get in Endgame is a different one, but I mean, obviously Endgame kind of ended that saga so well, and I mean, I can't say it enough. I don't know how we're gonna sort of achieve that sort of cinematic achievement ever again, because Marvel is going through, I know we'll talk about it, like they're going through a whole, now that the sort of core MCU characters are gone, either dead or on the sideline, or aged out like Cap or something. Like now they're trying to sort of reset, and then DC obviously is doing starting from scratch with James Gunn and Peter Safran going forward. So that's yet to be seen. So there's other movies I can mention, like the first Iron Man, the first Guardians. I really loved the Guardians 3 that just came out too. But I mean, ultimately, I think the sort of what they accomplished with those two films is just, I don't know if we'll ever see it again.
What about you, Pat? What's your favorite?
It's so hard. Like, because I've been an Iron Man fan for so long, and the first movie was just so good. At the same time, I absolutely love Thor Ragnarok. Like,
so good.
Every second
so
of it.
Good.
Every second of it. And it's one of the few films they got the rights to use the music from Led Zeppelin, because Led Zeppelin doesn't do that very often. It's only a handful of times they've ever let anybody use their music, and that was like absolutely perfect. Like what they did with it. Yeah, it's hard not to talk about Infinity War and Endgame. Guardians of the Galaxy was just so ridiculously good for being such a strange, out of the way comic like series that nobody knew, and yet it was this amazing movie. Yeah, I don't know. And then Loki, like every minute of that show. I loved every minute of that show. Good. I love both. Everybody's performance on that show was so good. And the whole thing, the introduction of Kang, all the stuff at the end, how they got there, everything. At the top of the heap is probably still Iron Man. When I sit down, on my couch and I'm like, I'm going to put on a Marvel movie, and I don't care which one, it's going to be Iron Man or Thor Ragnarok 9 times out of 10. It'll be one of those two.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, like what they did, that run that they had.
And it's funny because Marvel struggled for so long to get a studio to pick up their properties and do them how they wanted to do them. With the Fantastic Four bombing so bad, Spider-Man did well with Tobey Maguire. Just all right, to heck with this. We're gonna form our own movie studio and we're gonna do it ourselves, and we're gonna do Iron Man, who was he's not the X-Men, he's not Spider-Man, he's not the main guy. And then to pull it off, only people like me who were really into machines and that kind of stuff were really into him. To be able to drive forward with that character. And, I've seen interesting thoughts out there about how Tony Stark is really the villain through a lot of it.
Well, he in the movies, he kind of thinks he is the villain, obviously in like Age of Ultron, and in Civil War, he kind of bears that weight of, all the collateral damage, all the weapon, even in the first one, he kind of has like that sort of existential crisis. He's like, I'm just a weapons manufacturer, and my weapons get into the wrong hands. So yeah, I think that's a totally valid a valid perspective to have, to a degree, because Tony kind of feels that way about himself for much of his life as an Avenger.
He's trying to protect the people that he put in harm's way. If I just want to watch a Marvel movie, it'll probably just be Phase 1 because they're enjoyable, but I don't have a whole lot of, it's just enjoyable memories. But if I really, my favorites are like, to agree with you guys, my favorites are usually like the Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. But I can't watch them that often because I get like all emotionally worked up and stuff. I'm like, I need like,
oh, I know.
It's like I don't have time to feel feelings right now.
Right.
I don't have time to get sad. I just sort of watch something real quick. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying I cried when Tony was holding Peter and Peter was turning into dust.
I didn't.
I'm just not saying I didn't cry. I totally didn't cry. That was
me
neither. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no way.
Like I would agree with low. I put the streaming TV services on kind of a different tier. I really enjoyed Loki. That's different. Like Loki's still not a good guy, but it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, David, that the ones I enjoy going back and rewatching the most are a lot of the Phase 1 movies and Phase 2 as well. I think if I were to define my favorite as the movie I watch the most on repeat, it's the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, especially the first one. I just liked the first one. That was probably one of the most fun theater experiences that I've had in a while, because I remember when so my brother and I always just had this tradition of going to see the MCU movies together, and he wasn't too keen on Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, I think they had been in one of the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, but maybe, like, but we didn't really know who they were. I wanted to see it because it was a space opera, kind of outer space adventure. And my brother's like, I don't know, like he wasn't sold on the trailers. He was just going along because it was our tradition to see these movies together, and we kind of wanted to be completionist about it. But after kind of the opening bit of the movie where Peter Quill loses his mom, and then it transitions abruptly to that destroyed planet he's on, and he's doing the Indiana Jones stuff, looking for artifacts, and the song kicks in. That moment when he turns the Walkman on and the song kicks in and the logo goes across the screen, my brother looks over at me and just says, I'm sold. And the rest of the movie was a blast. Like that, just that memorable theater experience kind of made it one of my favorites that I always go back to. That and the Captain America movies, just because I really like so many people. I love Captain America as a character. He's probably my favorite Marvel character. Yeah, I just love rewatching those movies, and especially the end. And that'll kind of transition into my next question. Actually, I'll come back to Cap in a minute, but do you guys think that there's an underrated MCU film? And if so, which one is it?
If you guys don't mind, if you guys don't mind me saying I know that I said they're separate, but I think Hawkeye, that Hawkeye miniseries did not get much love. And I found that one just be totally fun. Not only did it have Jeremy Renner in it, it had his wannabe replacement, who Black Widow's sister, in there just because, and she made for a fun way to close it. And it was, you got to see him actually fight with arrows a lot, and just fight a lot. And at this point, 20 something movies in, he's almost deaf. He has to wear hearing aids. He has to he has some struggles with that, and he's kind of gave me a phase 1 vibe, where it was just the world isn't going to end, but man, this is fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, a few come to mind. I think the first Thor, is kind of like gets forgotten a lot. I mean, I thought that was I remember when it came out, I was just, again, too familiar with the Thor character. Like, I knew him from a lot of the crossover events, but I Thor was, again, like sort of when you hear Iron Man is going to be made, it's sort of like a B-list Marvel character, like a A- at best. Right, and Thor is kind of like that too. It's he's not Spider-Man, so he's not on that level, but we're getting introduced to these characters that are where they're obviously building up to the Avengers. And Iron Man was kind of made one way, obviously with Jon Favreau directing it, and Robert Downey Jr. being very involved. Like, it had its own sort of style. Then you have Thor, which is like this sort of silly, ridiculous, like Shakespearean sort of mythological storytelling in the modern world. And you have you get like Anthony Hopkins in there, was just the perfect guy to cast, to kind of be like the name, where Chris Hemsworth was sort of unknown back then. We got Natalie Portman in there, who's well known too. So I think they hit like a good sort of formula with that film, where the mix of the big stars like Anthony Hopkins and Natalie Portman, and then you're introducing Chris Hemsworth, and then obviously blanking on the actor's name, but Loki's character too. I think it was just such a fun movie. I mean, it's not upper tier Marvel. I mean, has like what some of the early Marvel movies, even some of the later Marvel movies too, they kind of suffer from a lame villain and that sort of thing. But I mean, just getting to know the characters and watching them chew up the scenery, is just so ridiculous. Like the way they talk.
Yeah.
But it worked. It could have, I mean, and obviously you get a Shakespearean director like Kenneth Branagh to handle it. That was, again, perfect choice.
One of my favorite little moments from the MCU is in that when Thor goes into the pet store and is like, I need a horse.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's just like, it's a fish out of water sort of thing, and it totally worked. And we won't talk about Thor: The Dark World, but the first Thor and Thor Ragnarok.
I liked it when I first saw it. When I first
had its
saw
moments.
it, I liked it, but I haven't really rewatched it since.
I liked Thor: The Dark World. I don't care.
I
what
said the
anybody
same
else
thing
says.
about Thor:
I
Love and
liked
Thunder.
it.
I liked it when I first saw it, but yeah, I don't really go back to it, and it's I guess it's kind of forgettable, but yeah, I mean, a lot of those first, I mean, Thomas, I think you're probably leading up to it, but even the first Captain America movie, I think, it's again very underrated and deserves more love. And then a lot of people hate on Age of Ultron. I loved Age of Ultron. I thought it was, I don't know why, it gets all the hate it does. I mean, James Spader was perfect as Ultron, and I thought it was, the whole the storyline surrounding Sokovia and all that. I thought, and I thought Ultron was handled really well as like a adversary, and the whole like creation of Vision. Yeah, it was. I thought Age of Ultron was awesome, and I don't know why it gets some of the hate that it does get, but
that opening like fight montage thing where they're going up the mountain to fight Hydra, and they're all doing their like that opening sequence to me was worth the ticket price for Age of Ultron. I loved that.
Oh yeah, and then when it goes into slow motion and they're all kind of in their fighting poses, yeah, it's totally comic book come to life.
Precisely, exactly. That's what I love about so many of these Marvel movies. They're like comic books come to life, which is kind of like, what I was getting at. My pick for one of the most underrated is Captain America: The First Avenger, which this is a movie that grew on me because I really didn't understand it when it came out. I'm a World War II buff, and I was expecting, I guess I was kind of expecting Band of Brothers in the MCU, like grittier. Because like I love Band of Brothers, like that's one of my favorite television shows of all time.
Oh yeah,
I mean it was. I mean it wasn't that gritty, but it also didn't like make it look all hoorah and easy.
No,
so it did a decent job of. I mean, if you read some of the old like World War II comics, everything was like, hey, we're gosh, gee, we're gonna beat the Nazis and that's it. But they balanced. They did.
Yeah, I agree. I think they really struck a good balance with that movie. With it wasn't jingoistic the way some of those older comics were, but it still did a good job of incorporating some of the things that do make going back and reading some of those old World War II era comics a fun experience. Just the kind of zaniness of Red Skull as a villain, comes straight out of one of those comics. Like he rants at the screen. He's having a guy paint like a portrait of himself in one sequence. He's just like he's very much like a Bond villain almost, or like but yeah, I think that I didn't understand it when it came out. I didn't understand what it was trying to be, and that the sort of campiness of it hit the right tone. And the more I watched it, I just fell in love with it. As I think it's a great origin movie, and the MCU has done origin movies so many times, and I still think Captain America: The First Avenger is one of the best because it really makes you root for this guy, and everything he's doing. And there's just so many. Even like, I don't know, I feel like even Guardians 2 was not as well liked as the first one. Yeah.
It's so good. I love that movie.
Right, yeah. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that was nice and random. That was nice and random.
Pac-Man cameo. Where Star-Lord becomes Pac-Man. It was just brilliant.
Yeah.
So, what are your guys' thoughts on the MCU post Endgame? Because this is kind of my thing. I will confess, I've somewhat fallen off, like following the MCU. I don't religiously completionist watch everything they put out anymore. And it's almost like that emotional journey up until Endgame, for me, it kind of completed something where I'm like, oh, okay, the story's over. And it's almost like everything else sort of seems like an unnecessary addendum. There are a few like things that they've put out that I've watched and I've really liked. I mean, like I loved Spider-Man No Way Home. Brilliant movie. Loved it. I watched What If, the animated series. I really liked that. I enjoyed that a lot. And even Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I didn't really like get into like the villain storyline too much, or like, and some of times it seemed a little bit slow, but I enjoyed that for the most part. I liked seeing Sam Wilson take up the mantle of Captain America. I thought that was brilliant. It's exactly what I wanted from his character arc.
And I like the history of like they brought in what is it, Isaiah?
Right. The Korean War Captain
America the 50s. Yeah. So those are good bits. I really liked that too. Sorry, I was just trying
no, yeah, absolutely. And having US Agent.
Yeah, I love the introduction of US Agent. That was.
And I like that he wasn't
quick rise and fall.
Yeah, I like
there.
that he wasn't just a cookie cutter like evil Cap. I like that he's a complex character.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm getting at through my kind of like tangential thoughts here is like, what's your guys' thoughts on how the MCU has held up after Endgame?
Okay, sorry. For me, it's been very hit or miss. Like you said, Spider-Man No Way Home, phenomenal movie. I had kind of forgotten about that in my list of amazing movies. That'd be pretty far up there too. WandaVision was I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I adored that show.
So good.
I adored the campiness of it. The speaking to all the old genres, moving through it. I loved the theme of it. And how it worked about grief and love and loss and all that. So yeah, Agatha all along. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And Loki was just so good. And then, you get some of the other stuff like Black Widow was okay. I kind of felt like it should have been more, for her character. I'm trying to think of what, and I've lost it. Some of the other movies that have come out.
Well, there was Eternals.
Yeah, Eternals was a pretty hard miss in my mind. It was okay. Thor: Love and Thunder, I think, was a proof that you should only do 3 movies. Keep to the 3 movies. Iron Man had 3, Thor should have had 3. Captain America got 3, and I've been hopeful because the last 2 movies, Quantumania and Guardians of the Galaxy, in my mind, that was sort of like Marvel has a chance here to really get things back on track and really move into the whole Kang storyline and make everything sort of start to bubble up and come together in the same way they did with the Infinity War stuff. And it's really whether or not these 2 movies can kind of use what's come before it a little bit and set kind of a baseline to build from there. I honestly think they did pretty good at it. I know Ant-Man Quantumania didn't get very good reviews, but I enjoyed the heck out of it. In part, I think because it had a lot of Star Wars vibes to it.
It definitely did.
It felt very much like a Star Wars movie. And then I saw Guardians last week, and that was phenomenal. Yeah, I only cried the one time, so it was really, really, really good. So I'm kind of hopeful, but it's been spotty, I think, overall, is what I'd say.
No, I think we'd all be in agreement that it's after that initial run, the Infinity Saga, as they call it, it's kind of been mixed at best. Again, I think they hit it with those TV shows as far as like WandaVision and Loki. I also enjoyed most of Ms. Marvel, but obviously there were some misses. Moon Knight was kind of up and down. She-Hulk was, it was. I enjoyed some episodes, but most of it I didn't really, I thought it was kind of messy. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I agree. I enjoyed it for the most part, but I also have my issues with it. Yeah, I mean, obviously the highlights, Spider-Man No Way Home. Shang-Chi was a huge highlight for me. That's
that probably one's another still on my backlog.
Talk about underrated movie.
I have to, but it looks great.
Watch.
Oh, you got to watch it. It's really good.
Marvel history helps, but you can watch it standalone. End credits might be a little confusing, but you will enjoy that no matter what.
I thought Shang-Chi was great, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that character. I mean, there was Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. I mean, I enjoyed it for, most part, but it kind of was underwhelming. I was expecting more out of it. I think they hyped that movie a little too much for what it was.
What they did with Wanda really irked me too, because coming out of WandaVision, there was so much there, and then they kind of made her into, one of the so-so Marvel villains, and I'm like, that's such a waste.
Yeah, there's so much development in that series, and then.
But yeah, I mean, Wakanda Forever, I really enjoyed, but again, that's like, obviously, unfortunately, not going to see the original Black Panther character anymore, so it's kind of like a lot of chapters closed, and it's hard to kind of see like the light, for Marvel going forward, because I think they're still trying to figure it out. Again, I also enjoyed Quantumania. I don't think it deserves the sort of hate that it has gotten. And I really enjoyed Guardians, but again, Guardians, that's closing a chapter, so you can't really rely on those characters. Or I mean, again, obviously you can't rely on James Gunn. Obviously, he's busy over at DC now. So there's just so much unknown, and I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff to look forward to, but it's like the confidence level is kind of like, not, it's again, they're not batting 1,000 anymore, so it's like we don't know how we don't know what, they still haven't announced what the heck they're doing with X-Men.
I was just gonna mention that. I was like, when are they bringing the X-Men? Yeah.
All right. Obviously, they're the sort of like Avengers level, like Infinity level of a war event that they're building up to is Secret Wars, and obviously, knowing Secret Wars, it's like you have to heavily rely on the X-Men characters, and I know Deadpool is going to have Wolverine in it, but that sort of seems like it's going to be sort of its standalone thing. It's going to be part of the MCU, but we don't know. Again, we don't know how it's going to fit into the bigger picture, if at all. So yeah, there's stuff I've enjoyed. I'm looking forward to seeing Loki season 2, obviously, and then I love how they've handled Kang's character, and Jonathan Majors' performance is amazing. But again, with all the controversy surrounding him now, we don't know what's going to come of that. So whether they're going to recast or whatever, but that's yet to be seen. So yeah, I think the state of the MCU is like sort of everything's in flux. I think what they have going for it is they still have, like, people are still going out to see the movies. I mean, Guardians is making a ton of money, but again, I don't know if they've found that. Like, who are they going to rely on? Like, they relied on like the core, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans,
Right.
For so long. It's like, how are they going to, like, I know, like, they have Spider-Man in their pocket, but Spider-Man, again, is you can't, it's hard to just put everything on Tom Holland's shoulders, and he's kind of playing both sides with Sony and Marvel, right? So
I just picture this little kid between two parents, Sony and Marvel.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and again, with the rumors surrounding who they're casting for Fantastic Four, I think if they hit on that could be really well received. You have someone like, if Adam Driver is, if he's really gonna be, I think they have Adam Driver, and I forget who else, but I mean, Adam Driver by himself is a good get for them. And if they
who
that,
is he supposed to be playing?
Mr. Fantastic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's just I think it's like, I don't know if they haven't officially said it's him, but from what I've read but like all the big like Variety, Hollywood Reporter are saying, like, they basically offered him the role, and they're pretty confident they're going to announce it soon. But and some of the other, they have other big names attached to, like Sue Storm and stuff. So I think Marvel is sort of, casting these roles with some big names, because I think they've realized they don't have that right now. That's again, and I mean, and just because you cast someone that's great, obviously doesn't mean it's gonna work out, but it does help. So yeah, it's I'm hopeful. I mean, I again, I'm looking forward to Kang Dynasty because the director of Shang-Chi is directing that.
Oh, nice.
And he's actually someone he was one of my first film teachers in film school. So
cool.
Yeah. So so it's kind of cool seeing sort of his trajectory. And he hit it out of the park with Shang-Chi. So I'm looking forward to that just for those reasons. But again, we don't know what's happening with Kang going forward, but hopeful. But I'm still gonna get my butt into this seats.
Right.
They have my money. I mean,
yeah.
Whether the movie sucks or not, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm still subscribed to Disney Plus, so it's in that sense, like it's working. But my enjoyment of it, is yet to be seen.
One of the things I'm really looking forward to since I saw the trailer is Secret Invasion. That looks cool.
It does.
Like a really action-packed, like spy thriller with Nick Fury. Like, I don't know, like just something about the trailer. I'm like, I'm sold on this. I'm going to be watching this. And I guess it is a series, right? Not a movie. It is a streaming.
Yeah, it's a series.
Yeah,
it's a series.
Okay, great. So, because like I'm definitely going to be watching that when it comes out, and I'm glad to see Samuel L. Jackson back as Nick Fury because they took him off the board for a while and put him into outer space, but it's good to see him back, and I guess this is kind of his swan song as the character, I assume, which will be interesting to see.
It's a shame, but he is in his 70s, so he could probably like.
I know, yeah.
Is he really? Wow.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah, he is. He's
wow.
He does look good for his age. Though.
Oh yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, he's doing great for his age. But yeah, if I had a 2 cents just to like my direction on Phase 4, though, just I was trying to boil this down while you guys were talking. Just basically after the Infinity Saga ended, everything else feels like a spinoff.
Right.
That's the best thing I can think, because they have this big cohesive plan, and now it's done and now that part is done after Avengers Endgame. I mean, I know they had lots of. I mean, maybe COVID didn't help, or
right.
I'm sure it didn't help because it didn't help anybody. But basically, everything hits misses all like everything feels like a different spinoff. Now it's not as cohesive. Are they interconnected? Yeah, but they're all like now I'm watching Rhoda instead of Mary Tyler Moore. It's a terrible example, but it's like they're all different. They're all different. The cohesiveness isn't there.
Yeah, I kind of had the same feeling where it seems kind of not completely directionless, but that like it definitely doesn't have that same vibe of like, this is one cohesive story, which like I feel like even in Phase 1, they were kind of faking it because they didn't know whether really they were going to be able to tell this story. But even when they were faking it, it feels like they had one giant plan the whole time. Like it comes off that way.
Well, they weren't like, they were like, okay, well, maybe we can move a little further, and then they're like, once it really hit the rails, they're like, oh my gosh, this is actually working.
Yeah.
I and part of me wants to think, okay, because I remember sort of in the midst of Phase 2, I kind of had the same sort of feeling.
Yes.
There was obviously this one bigger plot line going on, but it seemed like there was a lot of random-ish spin-off stuff, and that some of the main plot line stuff wasn't working quite as well. Age of Ultron was good, but not, in my opinion, not as good as, the original Avengers movie, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Where did these guys come from? An amazing movie, but how does this tie in? Like, there was a lot of question marks in my mind about how this fit, and so I'm cautiously optimistic that that's where we're at. Kind of here is that they're it looks like a lot of disparate pieces that are all going to slowly come together. Like you have the I can't remember if there was an official name for it, but the Dark Avengers, coming together with US Agent and War Machine and
Well, they're doing Thunderbolts.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's right.
I think
Yeah.
I think that's the movie that's going to end Phase 4.
And then on the other side of the ball, you have sort of Nick Fury's group who's going to come together throughout Secret Invasion. And then at the end of it, then you have like the whole Kang arc start to come into it and everybody realizing, oh, this is the real bad guy that we're going to have to face. So at least I'm hoping it's something like that.
Yeah, like maybe in hindsight, we'll be like, oh, yeah, of course. You know?
Right. Right. Exactly.
I want to kind of wrap up with one really fun question, which is, do you guys have a dream MCU adaptation? Like a story or character they haven't done yet that you really want to see them bring to life? I guess for me, I would really like to see them do Spider-Man and Venom in the MCU.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes. We need, which they kind of have hinted at already.
Right, yeah.
Which was fun. And I'm like, but no, I really need to see Spider-Man fight Venom. That would be really awesome.
I'd be more like they do so many like big spectacle ones. I'm more thinking of more of the, maybe not quite Guardians of the Galaxy level, but there's this one would be hard because they already did a show called a show on Netflix called The Defenders, but there was an actual comic book called The Defenders, which had some of the Avengers in it too, where they were basically a bunch of superheroes that did not get along. They're often called a non-team because they really had trouble sticking together. It had some of the biggest egos of the it had the Hulk, Namor, Silver Surfer, Doctor Strange, and four of the most powerful beings ever, and they'd get in fights more than anything else.
Yeah, they just did not get along.
So it's like saving the world from themselves half the time. And there were other heroes in there too. Nighthawk, Valkyrie was actually in there. And it would just basically seeing a bunch of screw ups, trying to save the world from themselves would be interesting. And then they already have kind of, I'm not sure if they could even do this one either now, because now they have what's called damage control in the MCU. A group called Damage Control. I read a couple of issues of the damage control I'm familiar with is kind of the goofier side of it, where damage control cleans up after the superhero messes, and then they have to wackiness ensues when they accidentally find some mystical rock that's still alive, or some undead thing that's still they have trouble finding a way to contain them, or you guys mentioned like how real world how all these fights impact real people, and then they'd have things where like some store owner would be mad because they tried to make a claim after this big superhero battle, but insurance would reject their claims because, oh, we can't honor your claim. I'm like, why not? My store got wrecked. Well, your store got wrecked on a battle with Thor, so technically that's an act of God, so we can't cover it. So it's just stuff like that.
I remember that one.
It's just technically it's an act of God, so we're not going to cover honor your claim. Like, oh.
Yeah.
So just I love all the big grand scale stuff. At this point I want to laugh at something silly.
Yeah, which reminds me too of another kind of, which would make a funny kind of lower scale comedy, which is the and I forget the name of this group. They're all the Z-list Spider-Man villains got together and formed a supervillain team.
Legion of Losers?
No, it was called the Superior Foes of Spider-Man.
Oh my gosh, that had Boomerang and Beetle and Rhino,
but
and
they're
Shocker.
all like the Z-list villains.
Oh yeah, Shocker, who basically looks like he wore a quilt. He literally did wear a quilt.
Yep.
Yeah. Those guys are good. The Superior. Oh gosh, they were awful.
Yeah, that would make a funny, just a straight up comedy in the MCU.
Yeah,
like that.
One of the guys,
funny.
his name was Boomerang. It wasn't even Captain Boomerang from DC. He was just called Boomerang. He was that bad. Yeah.
We need a good Howard the Duck movie.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
to replace the old terrible Howard the Duck movie.
Oh, I saw that when I was a kid too.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Ugh.
like I saw it at like a relative's house on the TV, or like not on TV. Actually, I think it was on VHS tape. But it was just like this. Even as a kid, I was like, "What the heck?
What is this?" Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
I think if I had my druthers, I'd really want them to do Civil War more like the comics, because it was good for what it was, but in comparison to the comics, it was very slapdash. You know, it was a single. You know, the reality is, to do the comics justice, you'd have to have a TV series, and you know what we got was a single movie, and it was good, and I loved it, but the comic Civil War was just so huge and so good, and there were so many levels to it that you couldn't explore in a single movie.
Yeah.
So that's what I would want. There's no way to do it, right? Because we've already skinned that cat.
You could do an animated series.
Yeah, that's true.
You could definitely do that.
Yeah, and they did What If.
Yes,
Like that if you had, 3 years ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said, oh, I would have loved to see, because I collected the What If comics like crazy. I have no idea why I latched onto that, but but I have a ton of those.
What about you, Andrew? Do you have a dream project?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're gonna do Secret Wars, so that's obviously one that I hope they really nail, because again, and as far as the comics are concerned, just like Civil War, it's such a big event, and to do it justice, you have to have a really good build up to it, and obviously they've played around with the multiverse aspect a lot with these, especially with the TV shows with Loki and WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness and that film. So and even Shang-Chi a little bit. It's still not, there's nothing concrete enough to where it's like, oh yeah, this is where they're going. It's like, yeah, we know there's Kang, but like, and Secret Wars, I know it's kind of far away, but like, again, it took 3 phases to get the, Endgame. So it's like, okay, what are, and like I mentioned earlier, we haven't met the Fantastic Four yet. We haven't met any X-Men yet. So they play big roles in the comics, obviously, in Secret Wars. So that's something I'm looking forward to, and I hope they nail. I mean, another one that comes to mind is Avengers versus X-Men. Just one of my favorite crossover or big Marvel event comics. So again, you have to establish the X-Men.
Yep.
And you have to have basically establish the OG Avengers again. Which, you could do obviously with multiverse stuff. But like if that's something that they're willing to do down the line, gosh, I would love to see that. And World War Hulk would be awesome too. I know there's like hints of it in Thor Ragnarok. They kind of hint at it at the end of the She-Hulk series. Maybe we'll see some version of that. Yeah.
This is my son. And you're like, what? What?
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I doubt we'll get the sort of faithful adaptation in the comics, because it would basically turn Hulk into a villain, but killing a lot of his best friends. But I would love to see like some version of it. And maybe if they do like, kind of like what DC said they're going to do, like these sort of Elseworld movies. But just do like, if Marvel wants to do like a sort of What If on a cinematic level, that would be cool to kind of visit these sort of big comic events that are really going to fit in the MCU proper. So, and I think something that they should do, and God, I know they won't, but I would, because they're too dumb. But like I'm so happy Daredevil's back, and I'm looking forward to the Daredevil series.
Oh, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, and I would just love to see Spider-Man and Daredevil together. Like they're such great friends like in the comics, and they have such good like storylines together. Like I know they say Spider-Man for all this big cinematic stuff, but if they can bring Spider-Man down a bit on a street level sort of thing, and Daredevil's such a popular character,
Yes.
like I think they could easily do like even a movie like a Spider-Man Daredevil movie. I would make a crap ton of money, and you wouldn't have to like, it wouldn't have to be like a multiverse space sort of thing. You know, it could just be a street level film with Spider-Man that features Spider-Man and Daredevil's two of their most popular on-screen characters. So man, I would love if they just did that. If they surprised me and like, you know, Tom Holland appears on the Daredevil show like for one episode, I'd be so happy. But I would just love to just see them together.
Yeah.
Like I know they have big plans for Daredevil on streaming, but I hope they fit him into the cinematic MCU films as well.
Well, I wanted to see him in No Way Home, and I'm glad that he appeared as Matt Murdock.
Right? Yeah, I like the cameo
Peter's
was great.
lawyer.
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliant. But yeah, we need to see them together as superheroes. I remember one of the first Ultimate Marvel comics that I read was a Spider-Man Daredevil team up, and it was great. And in fact,
It's always great when they're together.
and, well, and I think they were also together. I remember that I read this title at about, this must have been in the mid 2000s. There was a title called, I think it was called just New Avengers. And it had Daredevil and Spider-Man and Wolverine and a couple of other really cool characters on the Avengers.
And Luke Cage
Right.
and,
And Luke
Jessica
Cage.
Jones.
Yeah, I'm like that. I liked that lineup of
And
Avengers.
Ant-Man and Jarvis dated. It was interesting.
Oh, wait, I don't remember. Well, I only think I read the first couple of story arcs of that. So I guess I didn't get to that part. But I liked that team.
different.
So that would be something cool to see in the MCU. And just one random thing that I know it exists and I would like to see it. So if we're going to have the X-Men, we're going to have to see the Savage Land eventually. And that is something I would like to see on screen. And
that'd be so cool.
Kazar the Savage, that sort of Tarzan caveman guy who lives in the Savage Land and has a pet saber-toothed tiger. And he's basically a pulp, like Edgar Rice Burroughs sort of pulp adventure character in comic book form. And I love that stuff. And so I would love to see him. I don't think it would make any money. I mean, maybe because it would have dinosaurs in it. But I mean... But I would just like to see that just because I'm a dinosaur nut and I like classic pulp adventure. So that would be really fun to see. But do you guys have any other thoughts on the MCU before we wrap up?
Just be good.
Just be good.
Just be good, please.
We'll go with, I'll end with the ET motto. Be good.
Be good. Yes.
Be good.
Like take your time. Take your time. Don't like just shell out, you know, Disney Plus series and movies like they're nothing. Like
Right.
Just
You know,
give me a
just do it
decent
right.
Loki season 2 to start with, and I'll be okay for a minute.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yes.
absolutely.
And
And alligator Loki. Bring back
You know-
alligator Loki, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm seeing that everywhere now in like memes and artwork and stuff. So that really hit a chord with people.
Oh yeah. It's funny because it was real big and then it kind of got quiet and then it's come back again.
Yeah.
Kind of like the MCU itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So on that note, I'd like to thank our patrons who make Coffee and Comics possible and all the shows at StarQuest, including Layla L, Marie and Daniel M, Christopher N, Kristen R, and Deacon Gregory W. Their generous donations help us to continue to create the secrets of movies and TV shows, and you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And now we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What is your favorite MCU movie? Your most anticipated MCU project? We want to hear from you, and you can let us know on our Facebook page or on Twitter, or you can send an email to secrets@sqpn.com. Or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. It's a great community, lots of fun discussions. So definitely check it out. Until next time, David Handlos, thank you for joining me on Coffee and Comics.
Thank you. It's been great.
And Pat Mason, thank you as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been a blast.
And Andrew Hermiz, thank you.
Thanks. This was a lot of fun.
And once again, I'm Thomas Salerno, and thank you for listening to Coffee and Comics, part of the Secrets of Movies and TV Shows on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, PlayStation Portable. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at starquest.fm/PSP.